morning. It is 9 a.m. on Wednesday, I believe. Yeah, Wednesday, July 15th. And took a couple days off from doing this. One to celebrate my friend Manny's birthday, and then yesterday just decided to take a day just to relax, kind of do nothing. Marissa and I are almost done with our Marvel binge. We finished, I think, 3 movies yesterday. Just ate and hung out. It's been really nice to have the time to be wasteful in these ways. I thought about explaining that or correcting that, but I'm not going to. Well, looks like one person is on. There's 3 people on. If you will, shoot me a text or comment in the live feed. Let me know how the video and audio are. I'm getting mixed signals about the connectivity on my end, so just want to make sure we're good to go before I let it rip. I did have a couple of things I wanted to try to hit really quickly before drawing another name. The first is, had a really awesome conversation with Larissa right after the talk, and got a little long piece of hair right here. She encouraged me to share. It's crystal ball clear right now. All good. Thanks, Benjamin and Maddie. It's so interesting, like, thinking about different friends of mine that haven't met, what it would be like if they met. And Benjamin and Maddie, y'all would also love each other. That would be a fun interaction. Super fun. Anyways, yeah, she encouraged me to share something I felt comfortable talking to her about, but was a little more reluctant to. Maybe because it's personal, and also I'm trying to toe the line of, tipping the boat but not capsizing the boat, and being okay upsetting the apple cart but not just destroying all the apples, But basically, I was talking about schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, and just mental illness in general, and the demonic and psychology and all of that. And I was talking about how in the teachings of the Buddha, he used this term that the translation that was given to me was called not self. And I'm going to oversimplify it and take a really big concept and try to make it really simple. But basically what he was saying was, when we reflect on reality and experience, we realize that our personality and the aspects of our personality that we would call self, Mom said, looks good, sounds good. Thanks, Mama. Yeah, the parts of our personality that we would call self are impermanent in the ways that they're kind of changing. We can notice the way that they change, and also impermanent in a sense that they're we can't take them with us after we die. And the more we kind of reflect on them, the more we realize that they're kind of shallow ways of moving through life and experiencing life. And when we can not necessarily criminalize them, our personality and the aspects of our personality, but not also praise them and kind of hold on to them too tightly, we can experience a deeper part of ourself, or our awareness, or our consciousness, that the kind of Buddhist term is deathless. It's beyond death. And we can, when we're in that space, we can kind of know that and experience it. And so from the experience of someone who has these very pronounced personalities that are existing inside themselves, to be able to know that and experience that can be really helpful, because they're able to say, okay, just because I have all these in a way that maybe is more pronounced than someone else, or than the next person that maybe perceives themselves to only have one personality, I know that those personalities are not self. And so then the personality isn't the problem. The separate personalities isn't necessarily the problem anymore. That needs to be fixed. So that's kind of what we were talking about. The other interesting thing was, in terms of synchronicities, Sunday morning, I did a video stream with my Buddhist community in Portland Friends of the Dhamma, and Jessica was the one who was giving the reflection and holding the space and doing the meditation, and her reflection was on anger. And and kind of anger was something that I had just talked about. It was John Mark's topic. And so it was really interesting. Her perspective and her reflection in some ways was very contradictory to the one that I talked about, where I kind of talked about using anger in more skillful ways. And her kind of assertion was that there's no real skillful way to use anger. And so I've been reflecting on that a lot, and realizing that there's a lot of ideas around anger that I have just been accepting, and not actually being mindful of and experiencing and reflecting on. And so when I started doing that and really thinking about my experience with anger, I realized that, I can't think of many ways where I've effectively been able to take the energy of anger and then kind of channel it in these more positive ways, which, I feel like now I could talk for another 45 minutes on anger, but the thing that was the most helpful for me with her, that I was able to see so clearly, is she said, as far as using an energy for action, which is what we would normally use anger for, to use it to move towards action in constructive ways, so like activism or injustice or whatever, she said compassion is a much more skillful energy to use towards action, because even though we may be, and it may be really effective to use anger as an energy towards action, it may spill over in other areas where we don't want it to. So we may be able to use that energy to move us towards doing certain things that are really helpful and constructive, but then we've been using that energy, and then we go into our family or our friend relationships and we see that energy kind of spill over in unhelpful ways. Whereas with compassion, if we're really leaning on that and cultivating that for our energy towards action, then when that spills over and that spills over into our relationships, it's still having a skillful effect and skillful means. So that was really, I thought that was a really beautiful reflection, part of her reflection on it, and something that I have definitely seen and can think of specific times and areas in my life where that's been true, the kind of spillover effect. And then how, even though I mean to kind of use specific energy and intention in certain ways, it's not always that clean and clear and precise. So I'll leave that there. And draw a name. Let's see, what do we got? So I've got a few people on. Good morning. I hope y'all are doing good. Oh yeah. If you're viewing this for the first time, this is your first video. I am just giving some personal reflections on different topics spontaneously. I've talked to friends and family and gotten some topic ideas that they want to hear me talk about, and I am just taking one or two a day and talking about it. Alright, I want to get someone new. There's going to start being a lot of repeats on the draws. Yeah, if you want more of a full-on explanation, you can go to the first video on managing sexual energy, and at the beginning of that I give a much more extensive explanation of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Okay, I drew Bianca's name, and so let's see. Dance. I loved Bianca's topics because they were serious and important to her, but not overly. Maybe I should just say like theoretical topics, like dance. I love the idea of talking about dance. And kind of reflecting on dance. I think the first experience leveraging compassion for action instead of anger allows for more direct channeling. I love this. Yeah, I think so. That was what Benjamin said. Yeah, I think it allows for more direct channeling, and I think it allows for an elevated level of skillfulness and wisdom in our action when we're how we're moving towards the action, and then maintaining that kind of wisdom and skillfulness while we act. She brought up this term that one of her son's friends coined called going stupid, and she said that's how I feel when I'm in anger, like I'm just going stupid. I just don't have a capacity to be wise and act wisely. And compassion definitely carries an energy of wisdom with it, intuitively, and it's all packaged in there. So it's definitely more of a direct channel and pipeline into really beautiful action. So dance. The first thing that's kind of popping into my mind right now that I think, reflecting on it, really formed my experience and perspective of dance was growing up on Sundays when we would go to church. That experience was I've realized a very unique experience versus most people's experience of what church is like. And in the sense that, like, there was no expectation on what people wore. It was a very kind of, the energy that was in the room was very kind of come as you are, almost hippie-esque mentality, where there were people that, for the most part, the deeper reasons they were coming into that room was to have some kind of pretty pronounced spiritual experience. Like, most of these days, most of the rooms that I'm in that are either religious or academic is very much focused on coming out of it with some kind of like idea, like fresh idea, or, you know, it's really focused on like theory or idea, or, you know, having some kind of practical thing you can move forward with. And the agenda in the rooms that I grew up in was really more focused on having these pretty full-on, almost euphoric / psychedelic spiritual experiences without any kind of drug or medical related thing. And when you have a group of people that have that desire all in a room, like, you know, it's kind of inevitable that really interesting stuff is going to happen. And the musical experience of that was, you know, full band, rock band, I mean, drums, guitar, and usually like really skilled musicians, but musicians that also had a high value for improvisation. And so some of the songs that maybe the way the songs were written were like 2 to 3 minutes ended up becoming like 15, 20, 30 minutes long, as long as they were kind of feeling what they would call the movement of the spirit, they would just keep going and they wouldn't, you know, shift into another song. So one of the things that would happen during these worship sets is there would be a group of people, usually mostly women, up front, and they would be kind of improvisationally dancing. And there was no kind of trained skillfulness to the dancing. It was pretty it was pretty just unadulterated free expression movement with the music. And it was also like you could feel a certain level of vulnerability to the way that experience was happening for the people that chose to go up there and dance in this way. You could kind of feel that they're, for the most part, you could tell that they weren't necessarily performing for people. And you, when they were, you could kind of feel that too, that kind of performance element. But everyone was there to kind of go up, so to say, to kind of have this elevated spiritual experience. And so this was in some ways kind of for them a practice of that, and to experience some kind of union with the divine or experience with the divine. And so it was like super interesting, and I was really young, and I think that had I know it had a huge impact on the way that I related to dance and kind of moving my body to music, and bodily movements towards music was definitely a very unstructured kind of connection and association with music. And then you know, obviously my understanding of dance has been heavily impacted by the media and music videos, and TV shows like So You Think You Can Dance. But I don't know, I think for me, the places where dance is experienced that I connect with the most is when it's used as more of a pure form of expression, and the kind of technical elements I think can bring a beauty and structure to it, and are not important, but to be able to feel something beyond wordly expression through someone's bodily movement, with music involved, and the way that they're internally interpreting that and then expressing it through how they're moving, is, for me, can create a really transcendent experience, and while at the same time a very like embodied experience. And I think that's, before I started practicing yoga, that was probably the closest thing I had to like a real embodied spiritual experience, was a dance. So fast forward to like 3 years ago, some of my roommates in Portland were going to this thing called Sacred Circle, and I was, I had just gotten to I was probably a year into living in Portland, and was really just kind of excited to explore and see all that there was to this city. And it felt big enough but small enough to like, there was all these different things to explore and see. And so to find out that there was all these like, really fun out there people, and some not super out there, but that were getting together and doing free associative dance on Sundays in this beautiful space. It was like it's like a big like music hall kind of area, and all sorts of religion, non-religion, but they were just kind of getting together. They would have someone put a whole what do you call it? It wasn't like a playlist, but it was basically a series of these songs that for people to dance to, and then they'd have like a DJ booth set up, and I think they were just playing the music, but there was a real flow and intentionality to the music that was played. And there would usually be, there was kids too. There was young kids up to people in their 60s and 70s in wheelchairs, and there was usually anywhere between 50 to maybe 70 people that would come. And it would start out in a circle, everyone would hold hands, and whoever was holding kind of the space for this experience would set an intention. And sometimes we would do different, fun things at the beginning. And then everyone would just dance. And the only real rule was that you couldn't obviously hit anyone, to be mindful of your body movements around kids. And then you couldn't talk. If you wanted to talk, you'd have to go into a side room and have kind of a side conversation. You could make noises if you wanted to make noises. There was a little book that was like this epiphany book that you could, if you had like an epiphany while you were dancing, you could write it in and like ring this little bell. And then you could dance with people, but there had to be kind of a mutual consent to do that. And so you'd have strangers that had never spoken a word that were dancing together, and there was no right way to dance. Like everyone was expressing themselves however they wanted to. And so it created this really powerful experience for me that actually brought me back to my first kind of exposures of dance when I was 0 to 10 in these charismatic Christian experiences, where everyone that was kind of showing up to these the kind of modern day term is called ecstatic dance, but this was a very unique type of ecstatic dance community. But yeah, it was just to have what I would say also a real spiritual experience in their bodies in community with other people. And that was kind of a similar kind of hippie-esque experience that I grew up with. And it was a really I miss it. I miss the sacred circles, and I think they're actually doing them on Zoom now. So that may be a fun thing to hop into one day. I've seen some old friends that are still a part of the community, snapshots of all the little videos with people in their living rooms dancing to a shared audio stream, I think. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about with dance. Whoever's still on, if you have any thoughts on this, let me know too. I still dance. I don't really. I dance more like not super intentionally and more silly, like when I'm around people. But I do what I would actually very lovingly call prophetic movement, where I'm in a safe space, usually alone, and listening to some sort of music and more kind of free associative, moving my body to the music in a way that would probably make most people uncomfortable because it doesn't have form or structure to it, and is pretty expressive and weird, but it's powerful. I mean, I can move through. Sometimes I can't move through certain things that I need to move through, and then I go into that space of dance and, kind of free expressive dance, and I can express these internal things and move through them and be with them in a way that I just didn't have the access to do any other way. Love this topic and thought. Mom said, dance moves me into joy, and if I'm already in a joyful place, dance multiplies the joy. Yeah, for sure. That brought up a memory too. Yeah, that's beautiful, Mom. Dance multiplies the joy. Yeah, I just think, especially when you're dancing in a way that's like, I think if you have any quality of mindfulness, when you start dancing, you can tell if you're like taking yourself too seriously or not. You can kind of feel it internally, like, and it just has, I think it has this quality to really, the more that we do it, help us let go of certain things, and then also like experience some kind of creative flow really effectively and organically, and maybe even in a really safe way. So, Mom, when you shared that, it reminded me of something I would do whenever I was depressed. I don't do it as much anymore because my goal when I get depressed now is not to fight the depression or eradicate the depression, but to actually learn from it and ask important questions about it and observe it. But what I would do is I would dance, like staying with that feeling, but basically saying I'm gonna move my body in a way that was very opposite from what I was feeling, and eventually, as I was making this choice to move another direction that was kind of opposite of what I was feeling, there would be this break that would happen, and sorry, I thought my phone was going off, somebody else's. This break that would happen, and all of those kind of cloudy, intense feelings would break away, and then there would just be this surge of joy and life. And so it's nice to know that I have that, that I know that if I really wanted to leave my experiences that were feeling kind of oppressive, that I could make a choice to do something that eventually, once I did it for long enough, there would be this break and there would be this kind of fresh surge of joy and life and vitality. But kind of my MO right now is to really learn, get into it, observe it, learn from it, ask good questions, and move through it, than to just go to battle with it. I was in a stage of my life where I was just wanting to fight everything. I was just ready for a fight. And that was a really effective weapon. And I just don't have as much of a desire to fight anymore. Sometimes. But again, that experience of anger is just, it's lost its tastefulness to me in all its forms. I would much rather choose ease, calm, compassion, generosity, wisdom, spaciousness, these experiences. Mom said, I grew up having spontaneous dance parties at home initiated by my mom with my family, which was a happy memory in the middle of a turbulent childhood. That continued with our family since it was a piece of joy I could bring into my family life. There you go. Yeah, it's, Mom, I'm now, so my sister actually in college ran a dance studio. She danced her whole life. My sister did for, I think, 19 years at a dance company close to my house. So that I never even think about this. I was also just constantly going to my sister's dance performances, and that was a huge part of my life, was going to her competitions and recitals, and was always around it. It was always something that was a huge part of my life. And I wonder, Mom, how much of that was kind of informed, Kira's kind of movement towards that was informed by this really basic primal experience of dance being this source of goodness and joy in the midst of some kind of challenging experiences. Yeah, I just think of even in Native communities, their dances they do for a whole plethora of reasons. Celebration, the rain dance is kind of this like stereotypical when people think of dances, and just like they dance for so many different reasons, and it was such an important element, and still is, to that tradition. And I I think as a human race, we've been dancing since our genesis, since the beginning of humanity, and such an important basic thing. The last thing I'll say, and I'll anchor here for now, is that when I started spending a lot of time with the ecstatic dance community, because dance is their main medium. Where it's like growing up, there was like people were painting live in these worship services. They were doing music. There were people with flags in the back doing flags. There were people sitting down kind of like this. There were people standing up, moving around. I mean, there was just this desire to freely express however you want to express, whenever you want to, at any time, in a whole plethora of ways. Whereas and this was in my childhood, kind of spiritual, religious childhood, with the ecstatic dance community, it was just like dance was what everyone was doing. Everyone was centered around it. And you'd have people show up that you could tell hadn't been given the permission to just move however they wanted to move. And at first they were really kind of timid and unsure of themselves and not wanting to really go full dance. And but over time, especially over weeks and weeks of seeing them and showing up, and you would just see the shell start to slowly crack into a point where eventually they would feel very free just expressing themselves through dance, however they wanted to. And you can, if you really pay attention, you can feel the difference in someone's presence when they're opened up in that way, when those kind of like rigid internal feelings that they've been walking around with and carrying start to break and get disruptive. There's this, it's almost like there's all these internal dams that are there that are taking up space. And in this situation, through the activity of dance, all these like areas would kind of break, and then they would feel this real embodied feeling of being open and willing to let this experience kind of flow out of them. And and the beautiful thing about the community is there was no one specific way you were supposed to move your body. And so as you started moving into this experience of expression, if you were criticizing yourself for how you were moving, you were the only one doing it. There wasn't anyone else that was telling you how you should or shouldn't be dancing. And that was a really beautiful experience that I think had a huge impact on the rest of my life, of just kind of asking the question of what does it look like for me to create spaces for people to feel a permission to express themselves or be themselves over a longevity of time, to open up and let whatever's inside of them come out and express itself in whatever way that they want to, and they feel a real sense of genuine desire to. And what was it about that environment, and what was it about dance that helped create and foster that experience for a number of people? And then keep that river going for the rest of us that would show up to that space. And so that was a huge paradigm shift of an experience for me to watch that happen just through dance. There was no theory, there was no ideology, there was no 17 steps to X, pathway to this. It was just this really intuitive, organic, primal experience of, I get in a room, I dance with these people, there's this intention set, but over the course of time I feel this kind of openness and this freedom and even confidence in moving my body and expressing myself however I want. So that's been a huge game changer for me, and how dance has kind of impacted my life and the way that I've understood creative expression and how important creative expression is to the human experience. And then also my kind of critiques towards the importance of the intellectual mind and the theoretical games that we play, and how much I can even kind of get trapped up in my mind, and the importance of being in my body and moving through things in a very bodily way. So I will create a little bit of space if anybody wants to say anything. Otherwise, we'll dance into the rest of the day. And again, if you're on your phone, you can just shoot me a text. If you're watching this later, and for whatever reason you're still watching at 42 minutes, shoot me a text or comment on the video if you have anything to say, and I will respond. And I would love to hear what you think, what you feeling. Mom said hey to Benjamin. Mom has known Benjamin's dad, I think, longer than he's been alive. Which is really interesting. When we first met as adults, we didn't know that we had known each other as kids. He came over to a house I was living at, and we started talking. Kind of both intuitively knew that there was some deeper experiences that our kind of souls were tuned into and resonating in, that we just found connection with immediately. And then I think within a matter of 10 to 15 minutes realized we grew up at the same church. And then a little bit, probably a few days later, a couple weeks later, realized our parents had known each other for a while. And Benjamin has ebbed and flowed in my life, been a constant presence in my life since that day. I think I was 20 years old. It's either 20 or 21. So for the last 14 years. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it, dude? A lot of life. I think I've lived probably more life experiences in the last 13 years, in those last 13 years, than I maybe had a realization that I could experience in 40 to 50. It feels like those years from the time that I met Benjamin as an adult until now, it feels like 30 to 40 years of life. At least. A lot of really insane mountaintop experiences, a lot of deep loss, and a lot of transformation, a lot of different iterations of self. It's been fun. It's been a journey. All right. Thank y'all for saying hello, hanging out, watching later. Hope you have a beautiful Wednesday, beautiful week. And if you think of anything that comes into mind about any of this, shoot me a text, shoot me a call, FaceTime, any of that. Otherwise, thanks for showing up. Love you.